Okay. You've already done it, Manisha?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, you've already done it. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Okay. Let me text then to the students. You can also text your students and let me tell others also to text students.
That's also I've done already, ma'am. Once again, I'll do it. Hello, Sanskriti.
Good evening.
You know, Manisha, she's going to pass out this year. Sanskriti.
Sanskriti, she's so good, ma'am. She's so lovely.
Yeah. She is passing. So we'll have to find a new Sanskriti in the team.
मैम सॉरी टू से वो थोड़ा डिफिकल्ट हो जाएगा.
हाँ, इतना तो मुझे भी समझ में आ रहा है. जिसको तुरंत मैं बोलती हूँ कि संस्कृति आई नीड दिस एंड इट्स डन लाइक इन एन आवर एवरीथिंग इज डन. वो तो नहीं मिल रहा है.
None of my teachers have been able to find a good enough replacement of me, whether be it school or higher school. So I'm really sorry, ma'am.
So we will keep on.
Yeah, you'll have to come back to me, ma'am.
Yeah. I think every batch has some good students always. हाय बलजीत.
हेलो अनीता जी, नमस्कार.
नमस्ते. तो आज हमारा लास्ट दिन.
बिल्कुल.
हाँ, होपफुली इट विल गो गुड. मैम भी ज्वाइन कर रही है हमको
जी.
सिर्फ अब कौन, माधुरी ने ज्वाइन नहीं किया है? माधुरी और नूतन नहीं, इन दोनों ने. अच्छा, बच्चों को एक बार बोल दीजिए बलजीत.
हाँ, मैंने बोला था, मैं दोबारा बोल देती हूँ. मैंने कई ग्रुप्स में बोला था जी, मैं दोबारा बोल देती हूँ.
ओके.
आवाज नहीं आ रही।
हेलो बलजीत मैम।
नमस्कार, कैसे हैं मनीषा?
बढ़िया बढ़िया, आप कैसे हो?
बढ़िया, बहुत खूबसूरत लग रहे हो अनीता, मनीषा।
सारे खूबसूरत लग रहे हैं आज।
हाँ, और ये अभी मैं देख रही थी इनको, कहाँ गई ये? अभी नूतन तो दिख नहीं रही हैं।
मैंने टेक्स्ट तो किया है। माधुरी है यहाँ पे?
माधुरी अभी थोड़ी देर पहले थी, मैं उन्हीं को खोज रही थी, तो मैं देख रही थी माधुरी अभी थोड़ी देर पहले जुड़ी थी, शायद कुछ समस्या हो गई है। बहुत अच्छे से ये व्याख्यान माला रही, और आज का टॉपिक भी बहुत अच्छा है जी। बस यही है, बच्चे थोड़ा सा ज्यादा नहीं जुड़ पा रहे हैं, पता नहीं क्यों। हालांकि इतना सभी को बोला, हर ग्रुप में बोला।
मेरे क्लास के बच्चे तो सारे जुड़ रहे हैं, बट आई थिंक अ लिटिल बिट मोर। मैं वही बोल रही थी कि तरकीब वही है कि अगर हम लोग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन थोड़ा मजबूत कर देना विद ऑफिस बेयरर्स एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, वो करेंगे हम लोग 20 तारीख के बाद। 20 को शायद फिर से सेशन शुरू हो जाएगा ना? इज इट द 20th दैट द सेशन इज गोइंग टू शिफ्ट?
मेरे ख्याल से 20
Yes ma'am, yes ma'am.
हाँ,
It will be from 20th of this. Yes.
We have actually become no vacation staff. So I think after the 20th we can do that.
What ma'am?
After the 20th we can get, office bearers.
Okay.
WTC. वो एक ना चुनाव करके, not even चुनाव, maybe nomination or something. Get office
Yes, yes.
bearers students. So we will kind of.
हाँ, that's very important ma'am.
उससे फिर students ही students को ना कर लेंगे।
लेकिन हमारा ये भी 5 days का बहुत अच्छा रहा।
बहुत अच्छा रहा यार। I agree.
All the speakers, all our members and your leadership, everybody has done a great job.
No, not me. No. I think the team that has been constituted is a good team. I hope all of you came. I mean, you opted to be in WTC, right? Is it?
Yes ma'am. Yes ma'am.
Yes? I don't know. You opted in WTC?
मुझे आवाज नहीं जा रही है।
नहीं दे रहा।
अब बोले?
मैं बोल रही हूँ कि आपने ऑप्ट किया था WTC में होने के लिए?
नहीं, शायद नहीं, पता नहीं, मुझे अभी ध्यान नहीं है शायद।
ओके।
पूरी तरह से मुझे ध्यान नहीं है, पर मुझे बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है जुड़कर। मेरी आवाज आ रही है आपको?
हाँ, आ रही है।
जी जी, लैपटॉप से तो मुझे आपकी से समिति से जुड़कर बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, क्योंकि हम कहते हैं ना, ग्राउंड रियलिटी में जाकर बच्चों से रूबरू हो, बातचीत करें। और आज का बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा है यही कि हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा विद्यार्थियों को जागरूक कर पाए, तो है ना, तो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है।
I don't know. I think Nutan is still not around. Let me just see. Madhuri is here. मैं मैम को कॉल कर लेती हूँ because our speaker is ready to join. मैं मैम को कॉल कर लेती हूँ कि मैम भी ज्वाइन कर लेना। Let me just do that.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Nutan. Please tell your students to join, Nutan.
Yes, ma'am, I had. $39 is it? Hi, Paljit.
Hello, Rukmini ji.
Hi, ma'am. Rukmini, ma'am. Hi.
Hi Anita.
How are you? হ্যাঁ
কেমন আছিস?
আমি ভালো, তুমি কেমন আছো?
ভালো আছি। It's so good to see you.
মি টু, তোমাকে অনেকদিন পরে দেখলাম না?
হ্যাঁ।
Just waiting for principal ma'am to join and then
Sure.
we should begin.
Sure.
Maybe like 2 minutes. I just had a word with her.
That's okay. Hello Nutan ji. Hello Baljit ji.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Namaste.
We also have Manisha. So we have a new team, Maybe this year we have a new team of
Hello, ma'am. Namaskar.
Hi Manisha ji. Namaskar.
Hello, ma'am.
So now we have a
Hello,
All of you
ma'am.
from WDC.
Hello, Nana, ma'am. Namaskar.
yes, I think principal ma'am has joined.
Namaskar, ma'am. Ma'am, आवाज
की ऑफ है
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
It's okay.
ये ऑफिस ना मेरे को पागल कर देगा
नहीं
पागल एक अच्छे से पागल खाने का ड्रेस ढूंढ के रखो
नैना मैम कैसे हैं आप?
मैं ठीक हूँ नूतन जी आप तो दिखाई नहीं देते क्या बात है कहाँ पर हो
मैम यहीं पे हूँ 5 से 6:30 पौने 7 तक
अच्छा
मैम मैंने तो ड्यूटी लगा के रखी है ना सबकी
कॉलेज में तो कोई काम करके दिखाई नहीं देती ना नूतन
मैम ऐसा नहीं है आप जब भी बोलो ऐसा मत बोलो
मैं क्यों बोलूं आप कौन सी कमेटी में हो बताओ
मैं यहीं पे हूँ WDC में हूँ मैम
और
बस इसी में मुझे जहाँ डाला गया वहाँ हूँ वहाँ काम कर रही हूँ
आपने मेरे कल गूगल फॉर्म भरा नहीं था शायद है ना
भरा है मैम ऐसा नहीं है भरा है
मैं देखती हूँ आज चेक करती हूँ मुझे किसी
ठीक है।
कमेटी में आप दिखाई नहीं दिए वैसे ना
अच्छा
आज चेक करती हूँ
ठीक है मैम नहीं तो फिर से भर दूंगी अगर कहीं कुछ हुआ
नहीं हाँ बताइए अनीता जी बताइए
मैम शुरू करें
बिल्कुल करो जल्दी करो हाँ करो
Professor Stein is here with us. So Sanskriti, we can start the program then. Sanskriti.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Good evening, Professor Hasija.
Oh, good evening, ma'am. Good evening. Good evening, ma'am.
Please call me Rukmini.
You are our chief guest today and the speaker for the day. So for today, I cannot call you by first name.
Okay, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 5th and final webinar of the Gender Sensitization Program Series, being organized by the Women's Development Cell of Kalindi College. Throughout the week, we discussed how gender is a social construct, how it operates on account of patriarchy, how we are socialized, or how our psyche, our soul, and our society, as well as its processes and institutions, whether be it the state itself, are gendered. How all of it culminates into institutionalization of inequality and discrimination, subjugation and exploitation. We discussed how gender-based discrimination and violence hampers the autonomy, integrity, dignity, and liberties of an individual, especially those belonging to the vulnerable groups of the community, and what all provisions are provided by our constitutions, statutes, and legislations against such violations and harassment. There are mechanisms and organizations set up to deal with such acts and omissions. But is having laws for protection and progress of the vulnerable groups enough? Are even all the vulnerable groups of the community even considered as equal individuals, as full human beings in front of our society, in the eyes of our law, in the eyes of our lawmakers? We need to understand that gender is not limited to prescribing mere stereotypical irrational roles and responsibilities. Rather, it operates in indirect ways through which we, as agents, reinforce its ideals and instead of countering it, assume it to be natural. In such a scenario and state of affairs, gender sensitization programs like these tend to bring awareness and empathy among people regarding how the notion of gender, the evil of patriarchy, is further damaging the very fabric of our existence. Just imagine, we live in a world, in a country, and especially a culture in which even inanimate objects are gendered. A river is feminine, a mother, while a parvat is masculine. A river is expected to serve us for eternity and nourish us, while a pahar stands tall and proud like any man, taking up the responsibility to shield and protect the rest. The Women's Development Cell of Kalindi College has been actively engaging with the young women of the Institute as well as the staff and others through seminars like these to help them in developing critical outlook towards the reality of the society, or rather say, the gendered reality of the society. The cell has organized various programs over the years to create awareness and empathy among the people. It has been committed to ensure that the campus not only becomes gender sensitive and aware of gender inequalities, but it has also engaged with the concerned authorities to ensure that our campus remains safe for all. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Anita Tagore, convener of Women's Development College, on the dais. I request the rest to kindly turn off their microphones.
Thank you, Sanskriti. As we conceptualize this entire 5-day long program on gender sensitization, our aim was to not casualize it. So if you see the kind of speakers we got, we thought that there should be a theme, a running theme, a thread which binds each of us to the issues. So just like I keep on telling everybody, gender is everywhere. I think it's remarkable to find amongst us today, Professor Rukmini said, we share I don't know how many decades of camaraderie, but I'm very, very glad that she could find time, and she's one of those people who I force into my programs whenever I want to. Actually, she has no choice to say no, but I'm really, really glad that you're here with us today, and I'm sure that this session is going to be that thread which will bind all of us together to the different themes that we have run through this week. She's going to talk on the idea of feminism and the different kinds of conversations that we have had in the past few days, and how does feminism as a tool be used by us in our everyday lives as well as in research. I think that's a very important question which will be answered in her session. I'm very grateful to Nena ma'am, who has given me a free hand to organize WTC program the way I want to, without any interference at all. I'm very, very grateful to you. I think very few times we find such autonomy in working in the style that we want to. And of course, my students and my new team, who I'm extremely happy about, Naina ma'am, I'm grateful to you about that also, that I got a perfect team this time after so many years of teaching in Kalindi College. So I can proudly say today that yes, we will make a mark in your principalship. So without standing in between our speaker and our students who are eagerly waiting, I will give Sanskriti the charge to take over and proceed with the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Without any delay, I would like for today. Dr. Rukmini Sen pursued her undergraduate in Sociology from Presidency College. She did her master's from Jawaharlal Nehru University and obtained her PhD titled Gendered Construction of Culture of Silence in Significant Articulation from University of Calcutta. A topper during her graduation, Dr. Sen is currently a professor teaching sociology in the School of Liberal Studies, Ambedkar University, and the director of its School of Publishing. While the area of expertise includes sociology of law, sociology of kinship and intimacy, feminist pedagogy and jurisprudence, qualitative research methods, and disability studies, she has also taught courses like women's movement, gender in society, and politics, law and society, etc. A renowned academic and a scholar, she had published her articles, essays extensively in numerous journals and contributed immensely to the academic literature. In 2020, Professor Sen was honored with the Viscom Sahas Award, recognizing her continuous engagement with the curricula, using an intersectional lens and courageous efforts to bring structural shifts in the everyday functioning of higher education spaces through innovative ways of pedagogy and counseling. Since 2019, she has also been a member of the core group on women at National Human Rights Commission and has served as a member of the expert committee, National Commission for Women. We are lucky to have Dr. Rukmini Sen here with us today to shed more light on the theme engendering our everyday lives. Thank you so much, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
I think we will ask, I think Naina ma'am, since she has found time to be with us today, it will be really an honor to hear you, Naina ma'am, before we pass on the mic to Rukmini.
Thank you, Anita. Good evening, everyone. Anita, why did you say that, I have given you autonomy? That's so great of me. It's not like that. Professor Rukmini, I will like to tell you that Anita Tagore has been looking after WDC for quite some time in Kalingi College. And there's one thing in my life that I always want to work on the ground level. I never want to write and give a speech and not do the things. I work on the ground level and I like those people who work on the ground level. So Dr. Anita Tagore is one of them. If she's in charge of WDC, she has seen to it. Yeah. Clapping and applaud. I know she deserves it. So if she has been given the WDC, the cell in the college, she has really worked for it. And whenever she comes to me, she always has those plans that how to do betterment of the girls. And that is the thing that I love the most. That is actually development. Then, like this in pandemic, when we cannot call the students in the college and we cannot meet face to face, she has seen to it. Even last year, she organized all the webinar, the WDC, and she called wonderful speakers. And they all really, they help the students. They look at Sanskriti. I mean, whatever she spoke just now for a river and for a, rock, I really loved it. This is the way that our students should be taught. And this is what Dr. Anita Tagore is doing. I'm highly grateful to her that she accepted this time also that she will look after it, and she's doing it very well. This time also for 1 week long, she called so nice, eminent speakers. They were not only well-known speakers, but they really had the knowledge of the subject. That is the thing, Anita, that I like the most. Like, she called the ACP, Mrs. Vidushi Kaushik, who talked about all the, about social and cultural constraints around gender and sex. Then Mrs. Neelam Narang, who is, I think she's from that Indian Law Center. She talked about the way to make the this complaints and everything. So this is all very impressive, and it is for the betterment of the students, our girl students. We have 4,000 students in the student. I'm very happy about it. So I must congratulate Dr. Anita Tagore today that for 1 week she had this program and everything went on very well, and all my teachers who are attending and who are helping Anita for it, Baljit ji, Manisha ji, and Nutan Pandey, and all these teachers have helped Dr. Anita. I'm very happy, and all the students. I must congratulate all the students also that you have such a good teacher like Anita to guide you in this direction. Professor Rukmini, I welcome you once again. When the pandemic is over, I'll request Anita to call you in the college so that we can meet face to face, and we can learn from you more and more, and our students can benefit. Thank you so much. Thank you. All the best, Anita. And
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable views and encouraging words. Without any delay, I would like to welcome our speaker for today.
Thank you very much, Sanskriti. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure, an honor, a delight to be part of this program. And thank you very much, Dr. Hasija, for your extremely warm welcome. It actually takes away the distance. And I do look forward to going back to Kalindi College in person whenever it is feasible, given that I can never say no to Anita. That is something that Anita has already established. I'm extremely grateful to the Women's Development Cell of Kalindi College for conducting this week-long online gender sensitization program. And as you very rightly said, as I was looking into the list of speakers, it was so, it was so evident that the program has been conceptualized keeping an essential combination of social science academia in mind. And that combination is a combination of theory and practice, books and field. Keeping that alive, people who are working on the field, engaging in the field, getting their expert knowledge and combining it with critical engagement, academic engagement with it. And that is something which I'm sure would have benefited all students who are listening in. And clearly that the WDC has been doing an amazing work. I suppose a glimpse of it is something that we see in the manner in which Sanskriti introduced the entire concept today. I'm extremely happy that the principal Kalindi College, Dr. Hasija, has found time to join us, even if briefly, and encouraging such socially relevant programs for students and faculty at the college. It's something to be really, really happy about and celebrate, especially during the times. And we hope that these kinds of encouragement are things that can continue. And finally, it is not a thank you, but I'm really delighted to have been called by Dr. Anita Tagore. Anita, who, as she said, we have some kind of a decades of, feminist camaraderie and relationship. And it's just wonderful that, these kinds of conversations have actually carried on over the years. And it always is actually lovely to have, feminist friends who can make demands of each other, where the choice of saying no doesn't exist. Even those are becoming rare these days, and I absolutely value and treasure these kinds of friendships. So thank you very much, everyone. The title, the way I have titled today's discussion, as Sanskriti said, is Engendering Our Everyday Lives. And I'll spend some, few minutes in the beginning to actually discuss what does engendering mean and what do I mean by everyday lives. In some senses, trying to conceptualize both of these words, primarily because the risk in these words is that they are also commonsensical words. And, we might just try to use them commonsensically. But over the course of the, discussions that you've had in the last few days, I'm sure both of these have come to your reckoning, and I would hope that you will make connections with them as I try to unpack the meanings of these words sociologically and from a feminist lens. So I actually was looking into the meaning of the word engendering or engendered. What does it mean? And it's interesting that the Oxford English Dictionary says that it means give rise to. That's actually the basic meaning of the word engender. Engender or engendering means that you give rise to something. But what is it that you're giving rise to? You're giving rise to a feeling, a situation, or a condition. These are three things that have been laid down in the dictionary. Give rise to a feeling, a situation, or a condition. And I'm kind of trying to think with the series that you have for the of these 5 days of gender sensitization, what would this feeling, this situation or condition mean? So what is that feeling of engendering? It could be understood as an awareness or a consciousness of our rights and responsibilities as citizens. And when I say citizens, we might also want to add that as our rights and responsibilities as a certain kind of citizen. It could, in this case, we are talking about women, but it may not only be women. Yeah, it could be women, it could be people of other marginality. Woman is not just a woman. There is an intersectional, social existence constantly. But what is important is that to be conscious and aware of our rights and responsibilities as a citizen. What is the situation that, engendering gives rise to? The situation that engendering gives rise to could be any social situation where we have to question age-old patriarchal norms and practices that discriminate between men, women, and third gender. So that's the kind of situation that I have in mind, which is any kind of a social situation, any kind of an everyday social encounter where discrimination is prevalent. And what is the condition that we want to create? I think the condition that we want to create is a condition of equality and justice. And that's actually, a set of ideas which must have run throughout your, last 4 days, that it is a condition of equality and justice, a condition which is not just given in the text of law. Yeah, it is not just enshrined in our constitution, which it is, and we should celebrate it, that the preamble to the Constitution of India very clearly talks about these words: liberty, equality, fraternity, justice. Yeah, but it is also how do we put them into action? Yes. So what I'm trying to say is that when engendering means giving rise to a feeling, a situation, or a condition, this is all that I would have to say: a feeling of awareness or consciousness, a situation of questioning, interrogating patriarchal everyday practices and norms, leading to the creation of liberty, equality, and justice. Yeah, so that is how I would, break down the meaning of the word engendering. A second thing that I would want to do is to get into what does everyday lives mean. But before doing that, there is something that I would want to show you. So Anita, throughout the talk, I'll just give some images of either books or, other resources that I'm using. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but it is just, these images that I would like to share. So this particular book, I don't know whether, in the last 4 or 5 days, this book has been mentioned, but it is called Engendering Law, Essays in Honor of Latika Sarkar. And this is a set of collection, which was one of the first kind of a textbook which brought together questions of law, questions of gender, questions of constitution, questions of politics, and the way in which women's lives are led in family and in other public spaces and in the courtroom. So I'm sure there is a way in which, police station, courtroom, other institutional spaces must have come in the last few days of discussion. This is a good book to go back to and actually understand what does it mean to engender. In this case, it is engendering law, but what does it mean to engender, generally? Which is what I'm saying, the meaning of the word engendering. The next that I would come to is, so if engendering is all of those, then how do you engender one's everyday lives? How is it that we engender our everyday lives? Now, what do we then mean by everyday lives? Yeah, again, every day is a very commonsensical word, right? We would say daily, we would say it could be a moment by which we mean every day. But the most important thing with respect to every day is that we think of every day as ordinary. We think of every day as stale, banal, yeah, as opposed to, let's say, spectacular, yeah. Every day is not an event, yeah. It's ordinary as opposed to extraordinary. It's banal and stale as opposed to spectacular. It is the immediate, right? It is present, as opposed to, let's say, something which is distant. And as social scientists, we always would like to actually engage with the distant rather than what is present. It's too close to us. That's the reason why we even fear engaging or interrogating it. And most importantly, therefore, it is near and not something that is far. So every day is close at home, close to the words that go along with every day actually has been common sense, but very interestingly also a word or a term or literally a methodology that the sociologist and feminist writer Sharmila Rege used once, which is called testimonio. Yeah. Testimonial. So you've been having discussions around law and police stations, etc. What we actually write when we do a complaint is we actually write a testimonial of, let's say, some complaint that we are doing, some kind of a violation that has happened on me. I write a testimonial of it, and I also go to the court and give a testimonial. Now, very interestingly, Rege had used the word testimonial to talk about when Dalit women write autobiographies, they are actually writing a testimonial. They are writing about their everyday lives in the autobiography, but by writing about everyday lives, they're actually talking about caste, gender, family, their denial of education. So this intersectionality of different kinds of social structures come out in their autobiography, and then the autobiography doesn't remain a first-person personal narrative only, but it becomes a political testimonial, literally like what you say in a court of law. Yeah, and that's how the word everyday is actually understood. And Rege uses it, very interestingly uses it methodologically, using testimonial as a way in which we are talking about that ordinary, that banal, not that extraordinary, that's something which is near. We don't think that there is a story there. Yeah, something becomes a story only when it is an event. Something becomes a story only when it is reported, let's say, in the newspapers. Something becomes a story only when, when it is spectacular. Yeah, but our ordinary lives do not become a story. And I think that's a thread that I'm going to continue as I move on in the next few minutes. So with respect to every day and the kind of conceptualization that I did, there are actually three important references that I would want to give, which might help, our students. Number one is this, French sociologist, French political philosopher, actually, by the name Henri Lefebvre, who wrote Critique of Everyday Life, and there are two parts to it, Foundations for a Sociology of the Everyday. And what Henri Lefebvre had to say is that the everyday genre came to intellectual prominence only with the formulation of theories which came to be later branded as critical everyday sociologies. Everyday is not a purely descriptive category, according to Lefebvre. It is actually a political category, to the extent that it is used to critique alienating and subjectifying conditions peculiar to capitalist modernity. So there is a way in which Lefebvre is actually going back and talking about capitalism, principles of alienation, and how is it that actually happens to a worker in, let's say, a factory in his or her everyday life. A good, popular movie to watch is actually Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, which gives us a very interesting idea around what it is to be alienating in an everyday context. So that's one book by Lefebvre. The second is actually a very important feminist engagement with, some kind of a critique around this emphasis in social sciences on the extraordinary, on the rather than on the micro. And this is Dorothy Smith's The Everyday World as Problematic, a Feminist Sociology. And the most important, I would think, the most important contribution that Dorothy Smith makes in this book is to actually ask us that when we talk about everyday lives, do we also talk about every night? And she's making this very interesting conceptual understanding of time in terms of every day and every night. And is it that day and night, with respect to, let's say, accessing public spaces, is it the same for people of all genders? If it is not, and I'm sure we all would agree that, in most instances it is not, then there is something to actually problematize around what this everyday life world is. And, who is it who can have access to the every night? In this context, I'm just in the chat box. I'm giving a YouTube link of something which actually happened after the December 16 gang rape in Delhi. A performance by somebody called Maya Krishna Rao, who has been part of the feminist, performance for a very, very long period of time. She's done performances around dowry and dowry violence, etc. She did a performance which was called Walk. And in that YouTube link, you will get to see that performance. It's about 9 minutes, and therefore I didn't want to show it. But I'm sure students would enjoy it a lot. And what Maya Krishna Rao does in that performance is actually, in some senses, what Dorothy Smith is asking about who has access to every night in the streets. And Maya Krishna Rao is actually asking through this performance titled Walk, is can you walk in the streets of Delhi at all points of time in the day and night? Can you make claims to, let's say, Delhi's parks and other public spaces at all points of time in the day belonging to a certain gender identity? So that's the kind of questions that Maya Krishna Rao asks through Walk, which I kind of believe is in some senses responding to a theoretical position that Dorothy Smith is giving around every day and every night. The last book that I would want to refer to at this juncture with respect to every day is something which is a little closer home. It's a book that has been edited by Prashant Rai and Nandini Ghosh. It's called Protoho, Everyday Life Worlds, Dilemmas, Contestations, and Negotiations. And this has, you know, the image, the first page of the book, those of you who are, you know, interested in watching Satyajit Ray movies, this is actually from one of his films, which is called Mohanagor. And he translates Mohanagor as the lonely city. And the main protagonist of this movie, this woman, she actually gets a job in Calcutta, countering traditional patriarchal, you know, familial values that should women at all go out of the house and work. And this is set in the 1970s in Calcutta, and that is an important question, right, as to whether women should even go out of the household and work. And this book actually has a series of essays which engages conceptually with what does, you know, everyday life world mean. So this, if on the one hand we were talking about engendering, meaning giving rise to a feeling, a condition, a situation, and everyday life as things that are ordinary as opposed to eventual, banal as opposed to spectacular, and you know, and trying to lay down a certain kind of a sociological and feminist literature which is engaged with these. With this concept of the everyday, I shift to the next part of my discussion, which will be brief, which is trying to, you know, because I'm addressing students, trying to actually get to some, you know, some references in the recent popular, you know, culture, where I feel that the question of engendering and the question of everyday comes very interestingly. My first reference is to a film, a Hindi movie, which I suppose many of you would have seen. Just give me again 1 second to share the screen. Right. Yeah. So, you know, there's only one thing that I would want us to keep in mind when we watch Thappar as to why is it a feminist question? And I think the point that, you know, that the main protagonist makes in this film is that it's a slap which has happened once, but it can never happen again. Yeah. And it is this once and in the never that I'm actually trying to bring in conceptually. What I said is that every day is something that is ordinary, is banal. You can actually deny it, but you can also not pay attention to it, right? It just happened. And those of you who watched the movie, you would know that her husband created so many kinds of reasons as to why did it happen. Yeah. And he was not in the best of moods. He was having, you know, problems in the office, etc. And she was nagging and all of that. And therefore it happened. And when she went to meet the lawyer, interestingly, and, you know, I bring this because you had sessions, you know, around sections in the law, the lawyer interestingly was trying to tell her, where is your case? Yeah. What really substantively do you have to say? Do you really, क्या वो तुम्हें पीटता है, हर दिन पीटता है, किसी के साथ संपर्क है? नहीं, कुछ नहीं है. Yeah, it's literally like there is nothing substantive to say. And that's when she mentions this, you know, I find a very powerful dialogue, which is, वो मुझे थप्पड़ मारा है, एक बार हुआ है और कभी नहीं हो सकता है. So this ordinariness of, so this थप्पड़ once is not an ordinary thing because it ripped him. he can get away with this one thappar primarily because there is a history of patriarchal norms and values which will support or which will back up the fact that aisa to ho hi sakta hai. Right? There have been, very interesting studies which were done by, National Commission for Women in the early 1990s, which actually said that many women felt that it is all right for their husbands to actually beat them up. Yeah. Now, see, I think it's also important to unpack this. When they are saying that it's all right for their husbands to beat them up, I'm sure they're not suggesting that, beat me up black and blue. Yeah, I'm sure it's not that. But it is this chutka putka ek thappar, yeah, or do thappar. Yeah. So I thought that that's an important question for us to remember as to what is it that you are engendering. You are engendering that certain kinds of practices which is assumed to be all right. It cannot be all right in an ordinary familial context, right? The second, movie that I would want to talk about is much more serious, I should say. And it's a Marathi movie, which is Sairat. And again, those of you who have, and I'll really request you to watch Sairat and not watch Dharak. Of course you can watch it, but Sairat is the movie to watch by Nagraj Manjule. Sairat, again, is bringing out in the open what it is to be in love with another person who belongs to a different caste. Yeah, again, something which we might feel that it is quite ordinarily possible, however, socially impossible. Legally possible, but, right? There's something called the Special Marriage Act of 1954, which allows intercaste and intercommunity marriages. Yeah. So, this is an interesting site where the law allows you, yeah, but it is socially impossible to imagine that there can be an intercaste or an intercommunity marriage. There could be many examples of it. What I'm wanting us to actually understand through this is that, spaces or relationships like these are actually considered to be impossible. Yeah. So it is considered to be impossible. And why is it that it is required that we engender questions on caste? Questions on caste needs an engendering. Questions on caste is not just about, hierarchy for different kinds of caste, affirmative action, etc. Questions of caste are about these everyday life situations of what kind of relationships are allowed or not allowed. And when they are not accepted by society, the result could actually also be death. The last example here, before I would move to the last section of my discussion today, is actually a graphic novel or a graphic, representation, story, whatever you would want to call, which is called Commute, as you and the author Erin Williams is someone who very interestingly talks about her journeys from home to work. Yeah, and I thought the reason why this would be relevant for all of us in all of you in University of Delhi and I who teach at Ambedkar University Delhi reside in South Delhi and take the metro every day. Used to take the metro every day to campus. What does commuting mean for us? Yeah. And I think it's very interesting for us as, women, as people of third gender, to actually ask ourselves again, these ordinary everyday kind of questions, which is, do I use the women's compartment in the metro or do I use the general compartment? When I take the general compartment, do I hear, men telling us, aapke liye to dabba hai, aap yahan kyun hai? So, this dabba of reservation is again something then to unpack when we are doing this every day. Again, it's an inane thing, it's a banal thing, it's not something, and yet see, as people belonging to certain genders, what kind of negotiations and dilemmas do we actually go through, right? As if all of it is happening somewhere, in our minds, but we don't pay attention to it, just like that thappar, which is ordinary, we may not want to pay attention to it, right? So what she writes, Erin Williams, is very interesting, and I quote from her introduction. She says that this commute was literally a way to avoid being objectified, and the way in which, as a woman, you had to avoid being objectified was to literally cease to exist as a physical being. It's literally like you become invisible. I'm sure you're understanding that it is not an act of invisibilization, but it is as if, it's literally like, how is it that you ensure that you don't draw unnecessary attention? In your everyday commute, very interestingly, you're not even on a leisure trip. You're going to your place of work. It's not even, it is not even, to use, concepts that Shilpa Fatke and Samira Khan uses in why women can, of course, not loiter without any purpose. Women, to exist in public spaces, always have to have a purpose. मुझे शॉपिंग करने जाना है, मुझे चावल खरीदने जाना है, मुझे सब्जी लेने जाना है, मुझे काम पे जाना है. So, it's literally like, who is it that you're rationalizing? That's a question to literally think about, right? So this commute, which is actually happening from home to workplace, even there, as if you need to invisibilize, and even there you need to constantly make these negotiations within your own head. I wonder how many of us actually even talk about these things. We talk about it maybe when an incident which we think was not supposed to happen has happened. But we don't talk about our internal negotiations, right? Okay. The last, part of what I would like to talk about today, and maybe take another 7-8 minutes, Anita, is that okay? So the last part that I would like to talk about today is something which is actually very close to us. We are living it in our everyday, and yet I think we are living historical times, which is the pandemic. And I thought that I would raise feminist methodological questions by engaging with the pandemic. Maybe just primarily because it is something which is so now and so connected. We might just feel certain kinds of connect, but I'm sure you will realize that the feminist methodological questions that I will raise is not just about the pandemic. I'm just raising it through the question of the pandemic. Now, let's think about it in this way, which is that when we think about the pandemic, as I said, that it is something that we are living every day, and we are also literally living history. 10 years from now, we'll probably all remember what it was like in 2020 and 2021, and God knows whether it will be 2022 also, and what kind of lives did we lead? What were the kind of concepts, not just words, but concepts that we encountered during this time? Think about it. Social distancing, which itself could be something that is critiqued in a caste-ridden society like ours. The thing that the pandemic has given us is work from home. And I think, as someone who's been engaging with questions of feminism for so long, again, work and home both have, multiple feminist implications, right? If you have to think about it, we will have to remember debates around domestic labor that feminists, over the years have actually talked about. Women have always worked inside the homes, right? But home was never a workplace. Yeah. So work from home, therefore, is not just office work, but work from home is domestic work plus professional work. Yeah. And, in a broader kind of a cultural normative sense, where women are the ones who are, thought to be the nurturers and the caregivers of children, I'm sure that many of you may be able to tell more than me about the kind of experiences of when you think about women in the pandemic, don't just think about women as a homogeneous category. Think about what is happening to different kinds of women in different walks of life, where there would, as much as there would be distinction, let's say, between women who have biological kids and women who do not have biological kids, there would be differences between, let's say, how is it that a sex worker is earning her livelihood during the pandemic? Or how is it that single women who live in cities, what have they done during the pandemic? There are interesting studies around disabled women and the fact that institutional care has gone down. How is it that disabled women are dealing with the professional care and what has happened to them during the pandemic, right? So when I'm saying women and the pandemic, I'm actually meaning all of these. So don't look at women as a homogeneous category. That's number one. The second, since everything has shifted to home, so what is it, our understanding of the home? Home has now become a site of increased domestic violence. Yeah, we have to think about it together, right? Home has also become the site where parents are forcing their girl children to be married. Yeah, so home is all of this together. How do you conceptualize the home? Third, are women being able to make complaints to the police, to DCW, to NCW in a situation where maybe the person against whom you are wanting to make the complaint be very different, which may not fit into one particular legal, provision or something? So then what becomes important is that how is it that I actually, through my testimonials, something that I said in the beginning, through my testimonial, argue out that even within this universal law, how is it that the law can understand my specificity? Yeah. So it's important. And, even in jurisprudence, even in feminist jurisprudence, there's actually a school of thought which is called legal pluralism. Just like let's say there is liberal feminism, which talks about, all women should have rights equal to, all human beings. There's also something called legal pluralism, which actually talks about that different communities and different lives of different people are specific and to acknowledge that. Yeah. In India, there have been debates. Will the law uphold community rights or will the law uphold individual rights? Yeah, we've seen this in context of religion. We've seen this in the context of people with indigenous communities. So all of that has happened. What, to cut a long story, important that you talk gender, you talk engendering in your educational spaces. Yeah, nothing can be more important than that. Yeah, and if we go back and look at the history of establishment of women's development cells, it was something which was mandated by the UGC. But the history of it, there was something very important that was talked about as to why WDCs were necessary. And it had said that WDCs was, which was critiqued by highbrow.
Hi, ma'am. I have left.
Yeah, Nutan, we have been missing you. Every day after the session, we are chit-chatting.
Sorry, ma'am.
मैं बोल रही हूँ एवरी डे सेशन के बाद हम लोग डिस्कस करते हैं, आपको मिस करते हैं.
Actually, ma'am, I have tailbone problem. बहुत देर तक बैठ नहीं सकती.
अच्छा.
हाँ, बैठना मेरे लिए मुश्किल होता है, वो कुशन लगा के बैठती हूँ.
Okay, okay.
हाँ, I have cushion, just I am showing you. Just wait.
No, no, it's okay. I believe you. You don't
This is
have
the
to show.
cushion. So मुझे बैठा नहीं जाता बिल्कुल. थोड़ा मुश्किल होता है, और वो बहुत ही खराब लगेगा ना कि मैं लेट के कोई चीज, अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. So इसलिए. It's
I
okay.
hope it is just done. Let's just check if the YouTube live is closed and then maybe we can kind of.
Yes, ma'am, the live coverage is stopped now. So you
Okay.
can take the meeting.
Thank you. So I think thank you to everybody. It's personal thanks, to each one of you who actually, I'm sure many of you may not have registered also to an extent. But I think it's important for us to be part of WTC also to get oriented, okay, of the kind of subjects that we deal with. So ये है. दूसरा ये है that the WTC also does counseling. वो मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा है कि ये पैंडेमिक में कैसे करें. The counseling thing that WTC does, particularly for students who come and want to share. For example, only day for yesterday in my class, a student started crying, and I could whatever, but very little resources because she is not even in Delhi that I can actually go all out to help her. तो ये मुझे नहीं पता, ये आप लोग अगर थोड़ा सा थिंक थ्रू इट, और अगर आप बोल सकते हैं कि कैसे हम लोग एक काउंसलिंग सेशन स्टूडेंट्स का करवाए, बट इट हैज टू बी ऑल कॉन्फिडेंशियल. ये ही है मैटर WTC के साथ कि कॉन्फिडेंशियल काउंसलिंग. अगर स्टूडेंट कोई अपना पर्सनल इशू आपके साथ शेयर कर रहा है तो वो कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी आपको मेंटेन करनी पड़ेगी. And what I have felt is in the past 2 years that there are many students who need it, but they don't have access to it. ये एक problem जो massive आ रहा है. So we have to think through it and see how we can manage to,
Ma'am, can you tell a little more about this? That how could we organize such sessions that we need to call such fields, or we have to take these sessions?
No, Manisha, we don't call people. These are students who discuss about their own lives, okay, about history of molestation within the family, okay, or very very personal things they share, okay. So it is the teacher who takes it up. For example, I have gone many times to the police station to do FIRs, okay, but I mean without other people going along with me, but I have done it in the past. I've gone and done FIRs on behalf of students. Okay.
अनिता जी सॉरी मैंने आपको बीच में टोका. एक्चुअली आप सही कह रहे हैं, बिल्कुल बहुत सारे विद्यार्थी जिनके साथ मतलब आप सोच भी नहीं सकते इस तरह की